Sweet. Hi. My name's Chris. First time in Lithuania. Never been here before. Yeah, I had on Tuesday when I first came here, I had a Zeppelin. It was very filling. And I've had a lot of beer and a lot of drinking. You guys party way too much. um, but yeah, when when I was introduced to Andres about this conference, we were sort of talking about what my topic should be. And so he was going over what the event is about. And he was talking about how this event is around sort of unleashing the potential, taking the small region of the Baltics and thinking about the larger vision of it in the startup context. So what I wanted to talk about is just some stories about how small things can turn really big, and three like personal sort of stories of mine of how I did this. So my first one is I went to this school called Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California. So it's in the central coast of California, so that big red dot, that's where it is. On the bottom, that's where LA is, and on the top, that's where San Francisco is. So it's sort of basically right in the middle, right by the beach. It's not a bad place to go to school. It's pretty. It's also, it's really tiny, so there's only 40,000 people in the entire county, and I think 70% of those are college students, so it's pretty much a college town. So a small little college town on the central coast of California. And so I was going to school. I was just like a random business major, and I was at class and I saw this sign for free pizza. So there was an event going on and they were giving away free pizza. So I was really hungry, so I wanted to go to this event and get free pizza. So I go to this event, and it turns out there's actually two venture capitalists, so two investors. They were coming to Cal Poly to speak. I didn't know any of this. I just wanted the free pizza. So these two guys, they come, and these guys had both they had started multiple companies. They had sold multiple companies, and now they invested in multiple companies. And when I was a sophomore in college, I didn't know about any of this stuff. So all this was really new to me. So that was the first time when I thought oh my God, entrepreneurship is actually a real career path. Before that, I didn't really have context of this. So because I was young and I was really naive, while the guys, the venture capitalists were talking, I sat there sort of like you guys right now, and I was just thinking of stuff. So I just started writing down all of these ideas that I had while the guy was talking. And then afterwards, I came up to him with my notebook of ideas that I had written while he was talking, and I pitched him all 14 ideas that I had while he was talking after the event, which is not a good idea to do. But I was naive, and the guy, his name was Frank Foster. He was actually really cool. He was like, hey, have you ever heard of these thing called incubators? And at the time, this was 2006, incubators really weren't that popular, at least not to today. So I didn't really know what they were. And he was like, there's this thing called Idea Lab in Los Angeles, and you should really look at what incubators are about. So one of my friends, so the guy who actually put on the event that I went for free pizza, I walked up to him afterwards, and I was like, I want to do an incubator. So this guy, he was probably just as crazy as I was, so we said, okay. And there was two of us. So at Cal Poly, there wasn't really, when I was going to school there, there wasn't really any, entrepreneurship stuff. There definitely wasn't anything like this. It was super small. So what we started is we just started sort of like a club where there was, so it was originally the two of us, then four of us just started meeting once a week. And we just started talking about ideas, things we can do, and we would just try stuff. So this was probably the junior year of Cal Poly. So there's four of us talking about the ideas, talking about doing stuff, and we eventually started this thing called Innovation Quest. It was this program at Cal Poly where we would take all of the senior projects that were going on within the school, and we actually got some alumni to give us some money to actually fund the projects that wanted to continue. So anybody that wanted to sort of start a company, we would sort of help out. And this was this would be 2008. So it was still really small. And then by the time I graduated, it started picking up a little bit more and a little bit more. And then now, like, when I come back and I go speak at my school at Cal Poly, like, there's all this stuff that's going on, and it's crazy. Like, there's, like, a Cal Poly entrepreneurship club. There are, like, 800 people now. There's the Cal Poly Center of, like, Innovation and Entrepreneurship. They actually have, like, staff members, and it's, like, a real major. They have, like, an incubator, which is now located, like, in downtown San Luis Obispo. And there was actually a startup weekend in SLO. They're going to do another one in January. But all of this stuff started literally because of A, free pizza, and then B, like, we just started getting together and we started talking about this stuff. In Cal Poly, in San Luis Obispo, like, it's like, honestly, like, it's really not Silicon Valley. So the whole city is much smaller than all of Lithuania, probably like 1/30th of it. And we were able to start all this entrepreneurship stuff literally from like a base of 5 people. So that's how I started getting involved in all this entrepreneurship stuff. And then my second story is basically when I graduated. So this was June 2009. So I graduated, and then I moved up to Silicon Valley. Literally, I just like threw all my stuff in my car. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know anything, but I just drove up to Silicon Valley without any real intention. And this is actually, so I drove up on the day of my graduation. That small little picture, I should have made it bigger, but the small picture on the top left, that was actually on the day of my graduation, and that was my dad's last $20 bill that he gave me. So the day I graduated, my parents like completely and utterly cut me off. So put all my stuff in my car, drove up to Palo Alto, didn't know anybody, didn't have a place to stay. The first thing that I did was I went to, there's this place called University Cafe, so it's sort of like a coffee shop in the middle of downtown Palo Alto. So I pulled up my laptop and I went on Craigslist to look for a place to stay that night. So I'm like on my laptop, and I heard 2 guys next to me talking about Facebook. So I look up and I look over, and it's Mark Zuckerberg, the co-founder of Facebook, and Michael Arrington, the co-founder of TechCrunch. So I look at them and I'm like, hey, like, what's up, Mark? What's up, Mike? And we talk for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then they leave. And then that's when I decided that I wanted to live in Palo Alto. So I still live in Palo Alto, and that's sort of the main reason why I decided to live there. So when I first moved out to Silicon Valley, I literally didn't know anybody. So because I didn't have anything else to do, I basically just started going to events, things like this. And I started like meeting other people who are like-minded. And my problem was, in Silicon Valley, like, there's a lot of stuff that happens, but it was really hard for me to know what was good and what wasn't. So I basically just started going to all these things, and I started like sort of like writing down like what were the good things and sort of screening out some of the other ones. And then while I was doing this, some of my friends were like, hey, this is kind of interesting what you're doing. Can you send this to me too? So in November 2009, we actually sent out a newsletter of just basically the best events going on in Silicon Valley for the week. That's actually a copy of the second one. It looks terrible, A. B, it had the worst branding name. It was called Tech and Entrepreneurship Events at Stanford, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, in the Bay Area. Try to repeat that twice. And literally, it looked terrible. But that was the first newsletter that we did. And this was actually the first site that we had. It also looks equally as terrible. It was literally written in hard-coded HTML, probably the worst thing I ever made. But this was the first version of the site itself. And all it was basically, hey, if you wanted to know about startup events going on in Silicon Valley, you can come and subscribe. So it turns out a lot of other people wanted to get this too. So I think in the first month or so, there was about 5,000 or 6,000 people that signed up for the newsletter. And then other people wanted to do it in their city. So one of my good friends moved back to New York City, and he was like, hey, I want to do Startup Digest, but I want to do it for New York City. So we had Silicon Valley and New York City. So this was December 2010, so a little bit after I graduated. And then in January, so the month after that, TechCrunch wrote an article about us, and that's sort of like what got us really big. So after, did I talk about that? Oh, okay. After TechCrunch, then we ended up going from like the 2 cities that we were in to 14 cities, and it was basically the same concept. So in each city, so like in New York City, for example, it was a newsletter about the best events going on in New York City, all startup and entrepreneurship related. So the guy who did it, Carter, he was either an entrepreneur, investor, or hacker themselves, and it was this like very organic sort of like community-driven thing. But this is literally how it started. So this turned into a company. It was called Startup Digest, and we ended up getting up to, so now Startup Digest is in 148 cities. There's about 250,000 members throughout all of the publications. And we sold the company in October 3rd of this year. So we did it for a little less than 3 years and sold this as a company, which is kind of crazy. Literally, from a pizza to moving here to events to like basically an international media publication, that's how it happened. So it's really funny, like sort of looking back on everything, like it's really easy to get caught up in like what it is today. It's much more valuable to look at like sort of where it began, and it could start really small. My second company that I'm doing is, so as soon as we sold this in October, I basically immediately started another company. Oh, actually, one more thing before I leave this topic is there's actually a Startup Digest for Lithuania. There's a guy, Thomas. Is Thomas in the audience, by the way? Yeah, Thomas. Thomas, that guy, he's the curator for the Lithuania edition. So he picks all the events that go on in here. We had beers the other day. He's a really cool guy. So if anybody's interested in like the startup scene and like what's going on in Lithuania, like talk to him. He probably is better connected and knows more people here than a lot of other people through doing Startup Digest. So cool, you came. That's awesome. My next company I started is Group Ties. So through Startup Digest, we had this recruiting product, and that's how we made all of our money. This is actually a real screenshot from it. We essentially had like engineers, designers, product managers, and companies, and we built a tool for all of them to meet. And then we would get paid for anybody who joined any of the companies, sort of like a recruiter would. And my friend Danielle, who is running this thing called the Teal Fellowship, it's this crazy thing started by this guy named Peter Thiel. They basically give 20 kids under 20 $100,000 to drop out of school and do the things that they're excited about. Kind of a crazy concept, but Danielle, she has the problem is she has all of these fellows that they've given money to and all these mentors. So when she saw the product, she was like, oh my God, like we can take the recruiting product that you're doing and we can use it for the fellowship. So we sold the company in order to start, basically we just took out the software we were doing, the recruiting, the product, if you will, and that's our next thing. So it started off as a really simple tool that we made for ourselves. We figured out that other people wanted this too. We made some mock-ups, showed it to them. They were interested and willing to pay us money for it. We put it in the digest, got customers, and we're starting another company. So it seems like really complicated and really hard, but when you peel back all the layers, it's actually really simple. It was just something we made for ourselves and other people wanted it. So I guess I'm just going to end by, I guess, sharing some like general lessons, principles from some of these stories. Whenever you're like thinking about doing something, don't think about like how much work it's going to take or like all the things you're going to have to do for it. Think about like really small like initial steps you can do. So for me, like it was like being at Cal Poly, like being involved in entrepreneurship, me getting like 3 people together and like talking about a project that we were excited about. I wasn't thinking about like how are we going to sell our company. I was thinking about like how can I get like a few guys next to me interested in it. Think like really tiny. Another thing which is interesting is this whole concept in physics called chain reactions, or in chemistry. So as soon as you take this like small little action, you tend to notice other things start to happen too, and it almost like a feedback loop builds on itself. So, you know, when at Cal Poly, when I got like 5 guys together and we started working on stuff, then like the 6th guy came, then 10 guys came, and then 20 people, and then, you know, now at Cal Poly, it's this, you know, big, huge entrepreneurship thing, but all of that started as really small. It just sort of grew organically through this feedback mechanism. Another thing which is a little counterintuitive is like, don't think about the future too much. It's really easy to get caught up in like, sort of like, you know, sort of like the great quote that Katie shared is, you know, if you have scaling problems, like that's a good problem to have. Most companies don't have that. It's really easy to get caught up like, how am I going to raise money? Like, how am I going to like scale this product? How am I going to hire like 30 people? It's much better to think about like, what am I going to do in the next 7 days? What am I going to do tomorrow? That stuff needs to be weighted a little bit more. And And the last thing is, like, it's okay if it doesn't work out. So the cool thing about, like, starting small little things and seeing which ones work is if, you start 10 things and 9 of them fail and 1 takes off, it's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. You didn't actually put a lot of input into the one thing that did. Versus if you tried to just do one thing and you spent like 80,000 hours and $1 million on this thing and it didn't work, then that's like a really big deal. So when you think small and you start small little things, it's okay if it always doesn't work out. So I think I'm done. This is my email, so if you guys have like any questions or whatever, like feel free to send me a note. I'll also be around hanging out, and I think I'm doing a workshop after this. So thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris.